Hey, Interneters, welcome back to the Cyber Diner podcast presented by Cal Poly California Cybersecurity Institute. My name is Ryan Vanucci, and this is now our 6th episode. Thanks so much for hanging with us. As always, the goal of the podcast is to connect folks who are interested in cybersecurity to conversations happening on the front lines in tech. So if you find yourself listening to the show and enjoying the show, make sure you check out the show notes online at cci.calpoly.edu/cyberdiner. You can and should always continue the conversation if you're interested, and we try to make our show notes online an easy jumping off point. And if you're listening to the show and want to give it a watch instead, I would invite you to head over to the YouTube channel, the CCI YouTube channel, and you can watch the episode there. There's lots of other cool content, so don't miss out on that. So, this week on the podcast, we're joined by Bill Britton of Cal Poly, who is currently serving as the Chief Information Officer and Vice President of IT, and the director of the California Cybersecurity Institute. So Bill is heavily invested in leading digital transformation at the university and helping advance California's cybersecurity workforce at the same time. And with a long history in the U.S. Air Force and various leadership positions in defense, cyber, and IT, you might imagine that Bill has a lot to share with us today in this episode of the podcast. Today, I'm going to be chatting with Bill about the mission of cybersecurity at Cal Poly, digital transformation as it pertains to the cloud and how the cloud adoption has been changing the security landscape, and also how you can expect it to change in the cybersecurity workforce in the upcoming years. All right, here we go. Thanks for watching and enjoy the interview. So yeah, anyways, welcome, Bill, to the podcast. Really glad to have you here today. I thought we'd start if you just share some about your mission with cybersecurity here at Cal Poly broadly as a whole.
Sure. Thanks for having me today, Ryan. I really appreciate it. I think in my role as the CIO and also director for the Cybersecurity Institute, I have kind of a 3 hats that I would like to talk about. The first hat is how we look to always future-proof the university. That's making the right kind of decisions to make sure that we do the patching, the securing. We're using the most modern technology available so that students are learning with that technology, using that technology, focusing on that technology, because that's part of a polytechnic, right? That's what's really cool about it. The second part is how do you secure that properly? How do you make sure that the experience the students are having is something that is a secure experience? It's providing the students with the opportunity to learn, to grow, to do things, but also with the knowledge that somebody is there to protect them, their data, their information, their experience. The third side of it is to make it so that it's not just us, the older people doing it, that it's really them included as well in that, so that they're ensuring the security of the university. They're learning, they're expanding, they're part of our solution set. So that's really those 3 areas of focus that I try to approach with. And so that's why it's fun to be on events like this.
Yeah, well, it sounds like, as CIO and VP of IT, your responsibilities there and also being the director of CCI overlap quite a bit, right? Because there's that focus on cybersecurity. Could you talk a little bit more about, the overlap and the relationship?
Absolutely. So CCI is the opportunity to work with all the different vendors and community members that are working in the area of cybersecurity. It requires us to learn, to grow, the training, the certification, knowing who's doing what, keeping our eye on what the bad actors are doing, keeping our eye on what technology is changing, looking at vulnerabilities, talking to companies that are deep into the security postures. And then I have access to all that information as the CIO. So if I just sit on it and we let the students absorb it, then we're really wasting an opportunity, because the university has that same opportunity now to learn from all those experiences, to look at what's happening in technology, to be part of the solution set future. And I think a couple of things where that really comes to light, really cool stories, is I like our SOC, the Security Operations Center, which is run by students who have started off at CCI and received training from Splunk, and they get level 2 certified. They then go work for our security department. And in the security department, they're running the Security Operations Center. What a great story. So basically, Cal Poly students are learning not just to run software, but they're protecting the university at the same time.
It's really, it plays into the learn by doing philosophy through and through. And I think that's in students that I've known who have done some of that stuff, the experience they gain there at the SOC is really, really cool. With it, when it comes to, engaging more people in cybersecurity awareness and conversations, like your focus, especially through the CCI, is not just on university students, but the workforce as a whole, and professionals, the future workforce, so people who are still in grade school, and it's a challenge to try to get that many people, cyber literate, so to speak. And when we had talked before, you talked a little bit about something I think you mentioned as the big three, sort of this idea, digital literacy all the way to cyber literacy. Can you walk me through that really quick?
Sure. So one of the things that we found out when we started the conversation around cybersecurity, there's two conversations that I normally have. And the first one is in a room full of cybersecurity experts, give me the name of an individual that that's a white hat hacker that is protecting something really important that we can emulate for young people to know and pattern themselves after. And the answer usually is crickets. It's people are just looking at each other. There's no name. There's no idea. Sometimes somebody will come along with a really famous hacker, but only the community members know that, not the people we're trying to motivate. So, we then turn to the media, to social media, to entertainment. And so the last movie that really had a big time hacker in it was Black Hat. And the guy that played the hacker was the same guy that plays Thor. So, how many kids do you know see themselves in a guy who's 6'5" and goes to the gym 3 times a day and works out all the time? That's not the real world, right? So they really they don't see themselves in that role. So what we're really trying to do in our experience is to get people to see themselves in that role, to really understand and start younger doing that. By doing that, what we can begin to say is to say, this is an important conversation. The conversation has to go beyond cybersecurity. And so we really start with the first leg of this whole thing, which is the digital literacy. So if I start off with cybersecurity, people go to sleep. People turn their heads. It's not me. It's never going to happen to me. Somebody else worries about that. But when we start with digital literacy, that's everyone. Pick up your phone and look at it. To understand your phone and how it works, you're actually becoming digitally literate. Have you ever looked at a Facebook, and during Facebook, all of a sudden pops up an article about something you were talking about 10 minutes ago, and you're completely freaked out by the experience? That's digital literacy in action. That is the digital world connecting to your world, operating simultaneously. Another area we look at, we talk about radio signals. In the old days of analog, right, where you got a radio station, your measurement of success is I've got listeners. Somebody heard what I said. In a digital world, it's a digital signal with digital data. It's creating all sorts of digital information. How many people listened to it? How long did it take to get the message in there? What weather factors perturbated the signal? There's all this data that is generated in a digital environment. So it's understanding that our old world, analog, only generate bits and pieces of information, but digital literacy is about the development of communications connectivity on a larger scale, developing data, massive amounts of data in the process. That data creates this absolute need to understand the data. So how do you do it? Do you write it down on a piece of paper? Well, no, that's too laborious. So really it starts to come around. We get to this conversation about, I need something to compute with that collects all this data, puts it all together, makes it measurable, gives me something as a result of all of this effort and energy and information. And that's where cloud comes in, or data literacy, cloud literacy, which is really understanding that with all this data you formulate, it gives you new bits of information you never thought you had available before. You can measure the signal. You can measure how long it took. You can measure the quality of the signal. You can measure how do I improve the quality by doing certain tweaks to the system. So all of this now is computable in this cloud environment. So you got to understand that. Now, what happens when you start to look at all this data, you understand there are so many things in this data now that relate to me. It correlates about decisions I make. That's the funny one where Facebook now is showing me something as an ad that I was just talking about. That's your personal choice that's now being displayed through this digital literacy into a cloud that now formulates it into an ad that it's giving you. And so you start to wonder, whoa, wait a minute, what else is all of this data collecting about me or my organization or my company or my entity that I work with? And you begin to understand it's a significant amount. And so now the cybersecurity discussion, the protection of that data, the protecting of what you're doing, now it starts to make sense because everything in that digital world connects to other things that you don't see, you don't control. It generates data that goes into this cloud, and the cloud is just assessing the information. It's storing, it's keeping, it's using. How do I protect what I don't want them to know about me? How do I know to make sure that I do what I want it to do? And more importantly, when it does take something from me I didn't want it to, what do I do about it? And that's where that three-legged element becomes very critical to understand that digital literacy leads to cloud literacy, which leads to cyber literacy. Those three elements are the modern world we work in.
Well, when it comes to cyber, because that's kind of it seems like it's sort of the end of that road, but it's also, it plays into cloud as well, because as the cloud changes, the approach to cyber changes. And, when you enter conversations with people about the cloud, it feels like we're coming out of this era where people generally understand what the cloud is now, right? If they don't at this point, I remember when, 5 or 10 years ago, I was asking, what is the cloud? Well, now most people have a concept for what the cloud is, but maybe to them, it's still maybe like their iCloud or their file sharing cloud, but this isn't quite what you're talking about, is it? It's broader than that.
Yeah, it's all of those clouds interactively working together. That's where it starts to get really weird. This is like if you were to try to explain to somebody, you go back 10, 15, 20 years ago, and they started about heavy compute, and, we had major walls of computers. That's what, creating computers was. That's all done in the hand today, right? And that information goes into a cloud that ties to another cloud, that ties to another cloud, that ties to another cloud. So the compute ability here is unparalleled. It's massive. Right. And so bits and pieces of information on the East Coast, when fed to a West Coast, can multiply the intent, the content, and what you can get out of it. So it's just this massive amount of information bits flowing around. Way back, the security there wasn't compute ability enough to put it all together and make something of it. Now with cloud, you can put it all together and you can make something of it that gives you information you never thought you'd have available to you or be able to dissect down. So it's really changed the way that we look at things. Everybody talks about this next generation of computers. And when we get to we're here. We're actually here now, right? All that data, buying data, it's amazing. All the transactions you make online, although they may be protected, the actual search transaction until the exchange of money is tracked. That information is exchanged, not just with the entity that owns it, like Amazon, but it also is exchanged and given to the company that made the product. And so in that process, not only do they look at how long did you look at it, how many times you return to it, they're also looking at the size, weight, shape of what you bought so they can improve their shipping process. I mean, the buyer process generates so many bits and pieces of information that are all parsed off to all sorts of other entities. Is there information in that could be used to figure out who you are and what you're doing? And the answer is yes. So again, you really have to think about this a little differently. If you go back 30 years, the word was consumerism, right? Where you as a consumer, you looked at what you were doing and you paid attention. If I go to the store, I look at the apples. I'm at the store to buy apples. When I buy apples, notice this anomaly there, apples, Apple computer. So I go to the store to buy an apple and I buy these apples. Now, when I go to buy the apples, if I buy the bag of apples, there's a highly good chance that one of those apples is bad, right? And so as a consumer, I may not want to buy that bag of apples. Oh, by the way, the bag is cheaper, but is it going to pay me back or is it going to go bad? I don't know. I might buy just the number of apples I need, which is 3. And I take those 3 home instead of the bag, which is actually less than a 3. But again, that's a consumer practicing consumerism. Well, that's the same thing cybersecurity really is. It's consumerism on steroids, that you should be practicing those same thought processes of interaction, of intent, of content and outcome. as part of your cyber experience online or anywhere else?
Right. Well, so this becomes a problem, right? It becomes the goal is to help people understand using sort of analogies the way you just did right there with the bag of apples. But it's really, say I'm a cybersecurity student, or I'm someone in computer science who's interested in cybersecurity, and I want to help drive awareness around me. What are some of the things that you tell people when it comes to understanding cyber from a consumer level? You said once that cybersecurity is all about just making good decisions. It boils down to that.
It's really about keeping it simple, right? The KISS philosophy. The idea is the more technology you induce, the more risk you induce, the more opportunity. And the risk is not necessarily just the technology. The risk is the technologies and the individuals running it. So the more technology you induce, the more opportunity you as a human have to screw it up, right? And so again, if you don't need all this fancy stuff, don't buy it. Don't add it to your problem set to be responsible for. Also, I know you've heard this one before, but if you own an apartment, you have a house, you have something that you put locks on the doors and windows, you protect the stuff that's in your house. To not use password managers, password protection, multi-factor authentication is the same as buying locks for your house and then not using them, right? It just makes sense. You're trying to protect what's inside. So again, getting all the right protection stopgaps to make sure that you're doing the good things is the right answer. Going out there and saying, I bought the world's best virus software doesn't do you any good if you don't update your password, if you don't have multi-factor. So it's a series of the right way to think about doing things and keeping it nice and simple. Now, nice and simple. So an example, how many things do you put on your computer that are personal information and why? Right? Remember, the computer is it. So interesting parallel in life. I may go to Ryan and say, Ryan, here are 5 secrets I have about me that I want you to keep. Well, I'm actually giving you the discretion to keep those secrets, right? And then you get a choice to tell them or not. And so you may tell them or you may not. But again, I find out it was you if you do. The computer's completely different. Whatever secret you tell the computer, if somebody comes in and gets access to your computer and asks the right question, it will tell them everything. It doesn't hold discretion. It doesn't hold back. It will say, here's all the personal information that Bill put on this computer. Have at it. And so again, we're not using good logic to tell the computer all of our personal secrets and assume it will protect it. So again, it's about really measuring what we call sometimes the crown jewels, those things that are most important to you. And where do you keep that information and how do you protect it? Knowing what's on that computer is critical. And a lot of people will tell you, I don't even know what I put on my computer. Right. And so again, they've overdone the situation. They've made it very difficult to manage. And if somebody got in or broke or stole or they lost their computer, they're completely lost. I have to pick on my wife a little bit here. She lost her phone. All of her calls, everybody she knows is on that phone. She didn't know who to call because she didn't know their numbers. It's all stored on the phone. You don't need it. So again, what items do you really want to protect and why? And how simple do you make it to make it losable, to make it a loss, or to make it stolen or collected the information? Or what other things did you put in there that people, you don't want them to know?
It's interesting because we've talked a lot about all this stuff that comes with security, which is sort of it's where you go when you figured out that the cloud presents another layer of complication to what we're doing. But it's also the cloud is transforming the way we work. It's part of this digital transformation movement that's happening both at the university and beyond. Can you say anything about the potential that we have that makes it so critical that we use these secure practices because of what the cloud can really do and be for us in the future?
So one of the adages about cloud that people don't understand is cloud is not secure unless you, the user, make it secure. So if you assume that by going into the cloud, everything is taken care of by the developers of the cloud, you're on the wrong page. The cloud provides you opportunity to add security layers. The cloud allows you to add security envelopes, portfolios, containers, all those sorts of things. But it's your choice on how that gets put together. That's a completely different world than in the old days where I sent my information to a data center and I wrote them a check to make sure they secured it. So this is a different way of doing business. Secondly, what the cloud allows you to do then is to really optimize your security architecture for what you want. So instead of you paying somebody else to take care of it for you, you're designing. You should know better what you want secure, unsecure. So again, it's back to the comment we were just having, which is you got to understand what you're putting in the cloud and why you need to protect it, and then design the architecture to support it. So we use a thing at Cal Poly, which is called security by design. So as we put things into the cloud, we design the security architecture for that before we even begin to build the cloud instantiation. So we're working with security to work with the user, to work with the developers, that they design the right architecture with the right regulations, the right rules, the right structure before it goes to the cloud. So when it arrives in the cloud, it is already designed and operated in that correct security environment. That's different thinking, right? A lot of people assume, hey, if I put it in the cloud, they'll take care of it. And again, that's kind of the old school thought. But we don't pay for that. We don't do that anymore. That's not how things work. The importance then is understanding that what your data is, what you need to do to protect it. And as a university, that's given us a whole lot more flexibility to understand how to run the cloud to benefit the university. So we don't have to pay a major fee to have all this data taken care of at the same level. We have differing levels of data. Some doesn't need to be protected at all. We want people to see it. So we don't pay for that architecture. We don't have to include those rule sets. That allows us a lot more control over cost, over design, and implementation. So that is a major advantage to us as a university system.
Yeah, well, it sounds like what you've said today clearly demonstrates that security by design, is everybody's responsibility. It's not just the IT department or the developer of the cloud platform, but everybody down from all the way down to the end user. And it sounds like you're doing great work at the university to further implement secure practices with the cloud so that it can continue to be transformational in the future.
It's easy to be successful when you have opportunity, when you have out-of-the-box thinking, and you have innovation. And we're fortunate at Cal Poly that we have lots of all three of those things. And our students are our best resource in that area, and they challenge us, and it's awesome to see. That's
amazing. Well, Bill, I know you got to get going, so I really appreciate you taking the time today. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast, and thanks for your continued support.
Awesome, Ryan. Thank you very much, and have fun with the diner.
Well, folks, that concludes our time with Bill. If you're not already digging through the show notes for extra linkage and reviewing some of the takeaways, I'd encourage you to take advantage. Depending on where you're listening, you might find them linked in the description, or you can open up a browser and type in the URL like it's 2005 again. So that would be cci.calpoly.edu/cyberdiners/episode 6. So you can explore the notes, check out other episodes, and anything else that looks interesting on the website. So thanks again for joining us today. This has been Ryan Venucci signing off from the Cyber Diner. Have a great week. This podcast is presented by Cal Poly California Cybersecurity Institute, where we're training the next generation of cyber experts to navigate today's complex threat landscape. To learn more about training and research programs, visit cci.calpoly.edu. Special thanks to the team of Cal Poly staff and students that helped put this podcast together, including CCI Program Manager Martin Minnick and Cal Poly students and alumni, including Grace Pickering, Lauren Boyer, Nathan Danielson, and Jared Contreras. A special thanks to the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation for support in the planning and production of this episode. This episode is made possible in part by the Department of Defense and California Governor's Office of Planning and Research. The content of this podcast reflects the views of the California Polytechnic State University at San Luis Obispo, California Cybersecurity Institute, and does not necessarily reflect the views of the U.S. Department of Defense, Office of Local Defense Community Cooperation, or the California Governor's Office of Planning and Research.